Thank you guys so much for joining us again on our episode. Today we're going to hear from a fascinating person with some fascinating information. It's Dr. Kristen Gilliland with Vanderbilt University. Dr. Kristen Gilliland provides us with information on the science of addiction that helps us to better understand the purpose in prevention, community, and connection. I just first want to say thank you so much for being here today, for bringing your courage, your vulnerability, your willingness to talk about what I believe and I know that you believe is so important for students, educators, coaches, the community at large to learn about substance misuse, specifically as it relates to the opioid epidemic that we're in. I first heard you speak at the South Carolina Governor's Summit on opioid addiction or on addiction, wasn't specific to opioid, but on addiction. And I knew when I heard you speak that I needed to spend more time with you and I needed to hear more. You shared a lot about the science of addiction, how addiction is more than a moral failure. It's not a moral failure. It's really scientific. And then you also were very generous to share with us your personal story about your son, Anders, who passed away at 22 of an opioid overdose. And so I was very moved by that. And I loved how you took that pain and you turned it into purpose, and you go everywhere and you're willing to go everywhere to share that story and the science so that other people don't have to have that same suffering. And in your own words, you say, we're going to have pain, but we don't have to suffer.
That's right.
And so I appreciate you being willing to share that. As we go through this conversation today, I hope that you'll take the opportunity to speak both on the science and your personal story. And I think more than anything, what I want people to know, and I think you would agree with this, is that we're not here to cast shame on this at all, that everything that we say today and talk about is for the purpose of bringing awareness around opioids, dependency on opioids, other substances, mental health challenges, for the purpose of saving lives.
That's right.
And so just going to jump right into it. I'm fascinated with the science behind this. And so can you tell our audience and our listeners today why our brains as adolescents and young adults are more vulnerable and susceptible to substance misuse and to develop addiction or dependency?
Yeah, thank you, Alison. And I want to say, too, thank you for having me here. And thank you for all you guys are doing, too. You know, all you're doing is wonderful.
It takes a village.
Yeah, it does. When we look at the adolescent brain, and so adolescence is somewhere between 10 to 25-ish. And when we look at the adolescent brain, particularly when we're, between 8 and 13, 14 years old, it's going through major development. Okay, so major development. And what happens with substances is that there's this reward center in the brain. And the reward center is responsible for kind of fueling our motivation pursuit of a particular reward, but also getting that reward. And it's fueled by dopamine. What happens during adolescence is that, one, the emotional brain, that's kind of deep in the center of the brain, develops ahead of the prefrontal cortex, which everybody knows develops by about 25, right, as we hear. And that prefrontal cortex serves as kind of our volume control to be able to regulate those emotions, turn them down, and since it's not developed completely, it's very difficult for youth to do that. The other part is the reward center of the brain. It develops somewhat ahead of the prefrontal cortex too, but it's more active. It has more dopamine activity during adolescence. And so what this means is that when kids start using a substance like an opioid, it releases a lot of dopamine. And when you get these huge dopamine spikes, the faster that dopamine's released and the more it's released, the more addictive that substance becomes. And when these kids get that reward, that dopamine release, the brain says, pay attention to this. This is something awesome, right? And when you put that in with a prefrontal cortex that's not truly being able to make sense of what that is as far as a potential danger, you know, because it feels good. That's when we have the recipe for particularly opioid use disorder.
So dopamine, what exactly is dopamine?
Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, also called a neuromodulator, but we'll call it a neurotransmitter. That's what most people know. And it is the chemical that's within the reward center. And it's also in other parts of your brain and in your body. But we're going to pay attention to that reward center because that's what drives the motivation to use something and to feel the positive effects that you get from using that substance or doing an activity. Dopamine is made within the brain, and it is released for movement. And it's released also in response to trying to pursue something, whether that be, you know, an activity, whether it be opening your phone, whether it be even just the movement to pursue a rewarding activity, something like someone who might suffer from a drug addiction, the getting in their car to go pick up that substance, that dopamine is what's fueling them to go. So it fuels the motivation, the pursuit, and the reward.
There's not actual dopamine within the substance, but by feeling how the substance makes us feel, that releases the chemical dopamine.
That's right.
Into our brains.
Yeah. So there's not dopamine within that substance, but it interacts with the reward center in such a way that it causes the release of dopamine in the brain. And that's what we feel as pleasure.
So as adolescents or young adults, and we become exposed to an opioid in some form or fashion, whether it be an injury and that you've had surgery, and so they've given you the prescription, and you don't know what the risk or the dangers are of an opioid, and you feel like you like it, and so then you begin to take more. How do we prevent that? How do we?
Well, one, we need to make sure that there are other things like ibuprofen and Tylenol that have been shown to have the help decrease the pain in the same way an opioid does. That knowing what a person, their genetic predisposition is. And so what I mean by that is if there is any type of substance misuse in the family or addiction in the family, it means that you definitely are more prone to maybe liking a particular substance more or to addiction. So those types of things we want to go in when the physician says, here's your opioid, you need to take this to reduce your pain, which they would never say. They'll give them to you. If you know that your family has a genetic predisposition, then you really want to be careful with that, really careful.
And so I heard you say earlier that it can take in as little as how many days?
Yeah. So a study shows about 3 days to become dependent on them.
On an opioid.
Yeah, on an opioid.
Do people realize that they are dependent on it to begin with, or does it take time to really understand I am now dependent on this opioid?
Yeah, I think it takes some time. It takes some time, and it isn't until when all of a sudden, you know, a person might think, oh, it's 4 hours or 6 hours now that, I should take it, even though they might not be feeling pain, right? And that's one of the signs that you're getting there.
What do you do? What did the path look like? How do you recognize someone who is maybe becoming dependent on an opioid? What are some of those signs?
Yes, some of the signs, and I can talk about this because of my son and seeing them firsthand, was a social withdrawal, sometimes not participating in life as much, particularly when it comes to youth, I would say, too, and looking at if they're in school, maybe not turning in their homework, not wanting to go to school, change in hygiene sometimes, maybe more sick days, and definitely change in friends. That was the one thing too. All of a sudden, the friendships changed, and there was a whole new group of people around. And I think that those are big warning signs.
So if you're noticing this with a child or an adolescent, what would be something that we as adults could do to help to identify or to steer it in a different direction?
I would definitely go to speak to your child and just say, how can I help you? I think you're suffering with something, and I don't want to see you suffer, and I want to help you. Just it's something where you can ask them question and just try and find a way to get to the bottom without accusing them, right? And saying I know you're using. I think these are things that I with my son, like when I confronted him, which I did, there was a lot of, it created resistance. And I'm not saying because there are some people that will work well for, some people it won't. So every situation is different.
So I'm a big why person, and I always want to know why. So when I think about what you're sharing in terms of the science of addiction, and that it's bigger than a choice. Like there is science behind it, and we've given all the statistics. We give them all the time of 90% of addictions start in the teenage years. 45% of all student athletes walk away with a lifetime dependency on substance misuse. But why? What is happening in our brains? Because I think we can give other information all day long, but at the end of the day, it truly comes down to what's happening within our brains. So let's talk about what is actually happening, what is exchanging communication in the brain that makes this a disease and something that we really need to talk about in terms of not being a choice at some point.
Right.
I understand that initially we all make choices and there's consequences to it, but our brains are actually reforming. The circuitry is changing. Can you explain a little bit more about what dopamine actually is?
Alison, dopamine is a chemical or a neurotransmitter that is we can find in the brain and the body. When we're talking about the reward center in the brain, we're looking at dopamine fuels that reward center to motivate us to pursue an activity that's rewarding. Okay. It's also released when we get that or we do that rewarding activity, or maybe taking a substance like an opioid. And when we look at the brain, particularly the reward center, in this case, we want to always have healthy and stable levels of dopamine. Okay. When we take an opioid, all of a sudden, we get this huge spike in dopamine levels. Now, the brain wants to stay in what's called homeostasis. And what homeostasis means is that we have stable and healthy levels of dopamine. But when an opioid is taken, the levels of dopamine skyrocket up. And then what happens is the brain says, we're not in homeostasis. We got to fix this problem. So it finds ways to remove the dopamine. And basically what happens to try and bring it back to baseline levels. But the brain does too good of a job, and it actually takes it below baseline levels. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it takes it below baseline levels. And if you feel all this pleasure when you release a huge amount of dopamine, okay, so you feel this pleasure, this reward, when you get below baseline levels, you feel the opposite of pleasure and you feel pain. And I should give credit to, her name is Dr. Anna Lemke. She has a book called Dopamine Nation. It's a wonderful book and a workbook. But she talks about it being the seesaw kind of thing, or the scale that when we do something that releases dopamine, we feel pleasure. So the scale kind of tips towards the pleasure side. But to get back to homeostasis, the brain does, as I said, too good of a job, and it tilts towards the pain side, so the opposite of pleasure and pain. And in the brain, pain and pleasure are co-located, meaning that they actually, they're processed in the same part of the brain. and we can think about the reward center. So that pain, when I say it's not as much as like just, oh my gosh, physical pain, and that does come, but we actually feel the craving, the wanting, the desire to have that substance again, right? And that's just feeling that huge dopamine spike. And so what do is usually we will go and repeat that activity and hit that dopamine. But what happens when people continue to use a substance, it basically that the dopamine levels start to deplete because the brain is, saying in this way, I'm just trying to get back to homeostasis, and this person just keeps hitting these huge dopamine levels. Okay, so now let's take that in the context of an adolescent brain. So the adolescent brain has more dopamine activity. So it actually, I should say that it's more sensitive to rewarding activities. And when that happens, we think about that with the prefrontal cortex not fully being online. So if a teen, child, whatever, they're around their peers and their peers are, like, oh, let's go do this. And, and it's something that they probably shouldn't do. That reward center is saying, okay, well, I'm going to push you to go ahead and do that. And you don't have that prefrontal cortex, right? That's going to be able to basically evaluate whether or not that
risk is worth that reward.
Exactly. But they feel more, as I said, they get more bang for their buck when they're during adolescence. And that's why we see a lot of, kids getting behind a wheel, driving too fast, doing these things that they shouldn't be doing, or maybe participating in substance misuse when their peers are using it.
Because it's not just a substance that can provide a high. That high comes in a dopamine form, and that could be in anything that's providing you a reward.
That's exactly right.
So with that being said, then if we were to flood children's brains with positive rewards, does that do the same thing?
You mean positive rewards in terms of
so if they are being awarded for good grades or for playing, touchdown or whatever that is that the same type of dopamine that's releasing and that they become dependent per se?
Yes, it's all the same. And I if I can bring it to just like TikTok, right?
Yes.
TikTok, we have constant videos that are coming in, and they figure out what you like, right? They figure out what you like to look at. And so what happens is every time you look at these videos, you're getting these dopamine spikes, and then the dopamine goes down below that baseline level. But they keep sending you things that are similar, but maybe a little different. Because dopamine is associated with novelty. It likes new things. And particularly when it brings you a good feeling, it says, remember this. It reinforces whatever you were just doing. So by sending these algorithms where they figure out what people like, they are constantly sending you these videos that are a little different, but they keep you hooked because you keep chasing that dopamine spike. And it goes up, goes down, it goes up and down. And what happens is eventually, you're never going to get back to that initial hit of dopamine. And it just keeps going down, and you're going to end up below baseline levels. And this is where we run into problems now, because a lot of kids and adults actually we're at this below baseline level of dopamine, and we're feeling this maybe anxiety. We're feeling this, craving, withdrawal, whatever it might be, to pick up your phone, right?
Right.
The minute you see a notification, you get a little hit of dopamine. And that's what the dopamine is, what provides you the little push to open up your phone and see the notification. And if that notification gives you something good, like, oh, that's great, you get lots of likes and lots of great comments, that is just giving the reinforcement to the brain that that was the right thing to do.
And that's what generates the dependency.
Yes.
So you've taken a substance that has allowed the dopamine to elevate, and then it comes down. You take it again to get the dopamine hit, and then over time you become dependent on it.
Yeah, and what happens is that when we look at the neurons, the one neuron that's releasing the dopamine and the other neuron that is basically catching it, right, and told what to do. when we're looking at this, it's that what's actually on the neuron that's catching the dopamine is a receptor. So it's a receptor. And when it binds to that receptor, that neuron's told what to do. But if we keep hitting that same neuron continuously with dopamine, those receptors, or I like to call them catcher's mitts, we're on Play Smart, right?
Yeah.
The catcher's mitts, they go away. They basically, the cell will pull them inside. And when they're not actually on the cell receptor, then when the dopamine is released, there's nothing there to catch it. And the brain is very smart about then regulating the amount of dopamine, because it's saying, oh, if there's not that catcher's mitt or that receptor to catch it, I'd better dial down the amount of dopamine I release. And when that happens, that means that you're releasing less dopamine. So how are you going to feel? You're going to be below those levels. Yep. And the only way that you know how to get back to trying to pursue pleasure is to take more of that substance or do more of that activity. And in this case, this is how it's a disease, because you're no longer feeling the pleasure. You are taking the substance just to feel normal again. And this is the issue where a lot of people think, oh, it's this lack of willpower. It's this moral failure. It is so untrue, because what it is the reward system is basically broken.
Right. So if the reward system is broken, how do we repair the reward system?
That is a great question, and you can. It's not going to be easy, but in life, life is not easy.
That's right.
Life is not easy, but what can be done is by going through a fast, like a dopamine fast, of whatever you were pursuing that was causing that continuous release. We said it was a substance. It would be, not taking that substance anymore, which is very, very difficult, particularly with opioids.
Can you replace the reward with something else to reward you?
Doing hard things. Doing hard things can help. And I think it also, just doing hard things when you're in that state can give you a lot more self-confidence too.
What would be an example of a hard thing? What do people often replace substance misuse, or once it becomes a full-fledged addiction with? What are some ideas?
Well, I do know, the AA program has been an amazing program. And that is, it's community, it's people, it's faith, it's all of that. That's been an amazing program for some people. And also, I think it depends on what it is. Like, definitely opioid withdrawal, you're going to have to go and get professional help with that, because that is serious, very serious. Some other drugs as well too. But if it were an activity that is maybe your phone, you got to put it aside and then go mow your lawn. Doing things that you honestly, you really, you don't want to do. But, it's like when you do something for another person, for instance, if you go volunteer and you go help somebody, how do you feel after that?
Yeah. You think you're doing it for them. And then at the end of the day, you walk home and you say, that was for me.
Yes.
Yeah. I've been on 2 mission trips, and I remember going thinking I was helping the people that were involved in the mission trip. And then when I returned home thinking, I don't know if they got anything from this, but I 100% did. So I totally understand what you're saying with by volunteering and that reward that you get from that.
Yeah, and I think that that's beautiful, and I know that those people did get something from that. But also, it's believing there's something bigger than yourself too, right?
Right.
And I think that's what helps a lot of people who are in recovery, and making amends with all those things. But I really feel when it comes to something, an addiction that's like whatever it might be, some activity. I love to run. That's my addiction. Okay. But I think it's a healthy addiction.
Yep. And I was going to talk about running. So I'm a runner too.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. So we could sit here all day and talk about running too.
Yes, exactly.
But one of the things that that what you're talking about is so true even with running.
Yes.
So like you finish a marathon, and if you don't have something next on your schedule or another goal, then you're in the valley.
Yeah, and that's endorphins, right? Because
Right.
endorphins are what are released in that rewards, looking at that in that case of not feeling that pain, right? And causing the release of dopamine that we have in there.
And I know a lot of athletes, adult athletes, that, at one point did have some type of addiction or something that they were struggling with, that they replaced the addiction with running or some other type of activity that I guess, provided that same sense of reward for them. I don't know the science behind it. I mean, you're teaching the science behind it, but I guess there is a science behind that.
There's definitely with just the high feeling, the runner's high and all of that. Yeah, and it's the same because endorphins are the same things that help to block the feeling of pain, right? And so that's what we're getting is where it's lessening the pain. And in a different way, like when you go out for a run, it boosts your dopamine levels, it boosts your serotonin levels. There's another thing called norepinephrine, it boosts those. And those are the things that we can do. We can do activities and sports and things like that. And it's a double whammy because in a good way, because not only are you, bringing health to yourself, but you're actually doing better for your brain.
As it relates to our brains, let's talk about the correlation in mental health and substance misuse or abuse. And I do like to really focus on misuse because I believe a lot of addictions didn't start from an abusive situation. It really was a misuse of a prescription of some sort. And so people don't start to get high. They start sometimes to either escape or to fit in or whatever that ecosystem that they're in looks like. And so can we talk a little bit about the correlation of mental health and substance misuse?
Yeah, that's a great subject because there are most people who have mental health challenges, and there are many. If like, I'm going to bring it back to my son, because my son was someone who had anxiety. And I asked him when he was using heroin, I asked him, what is it about heroin? What is it about it? And he said, it feeds my soul. And I said, but temporarily it does. It doesn't, when you get out of it. And he said, I don't care. And that's where you realize that it is something for him. It filled this void he had in him. And I think there are so many people who feel this way, and they might try and use, maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's weed, which is a big issue these days. Or maybe it is an opioid that all of a sudden they've been given after a surgery. And this brings up a good point when we look at people who are in sports and they get injured. And then not only are they injured, they're taken away from their sports, they're taken away from their community. That is a huge challenge on your mental health. I mean, I know as a runner, when I get injured, I just stay away from me.
Right. Yeah. They're so, like, Alison, go run.
That's right.
When I'm irritated, go run. You'll feel better.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's the dopamine too.
That's the dopamine.
Yeah.
So we talking about injury of student athletes.
Well, yeah.
And we also talk about pain of, that people physically have and they start taking opioids. But to your point, there's other types of pain. So you have the pain to fit in. You have the pain of trauma that has happened in your life. You have the pain of just the rigors of training, the rigors of life, pressure to perform, and then, of course, just injury management in general. And so all of those things lead to sometimes a choice that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a moral failure. But one of the things that I like to point out is that what we have created here is really a public health crisis, a public market failure versus a public moral failure. And so the reason for that is because we have lack of information. or information asymmetry, as we want to call it, where the information isn't really the truth behind it, or extreme marketing campaigns that are making us feel like we should be a part of that. And so I say all of that to say, what can we do better to let people understand that we understand the rigors of training or the rigors of life, the pressure to perform, whether we know that pressure is not always a bad thing. It's sometimes good. It creates diamonds, but it also creates explosions. And also just the injury prevention side of it. What are some things that you think we should tell people so that they can be prepared, educated, aware of what could happen when they're not aware? That was a loaded question.
No, it's a great question. I first think that we have to understand that, yes, life it's up and down. It's comfortable, it's uncomfortable. And that's part of life. And that when we get these crises that happen in our life, that they're temporary. And know that when you take a substance, for instance, to try when you're going through those crises, it makes it go away temporarily, right? I mean, but that is not, it's not the solution, right? What is the solution is you checking in with yourself and really investigating how you're feeling and even being curious about how you feel. Mm. And I think that's something we don't do. Like, if I feel anxious, I really try now, not all the time, because I definitely have my my times I don't do this, but to really check in and say first I'll say, hi, anxiety. Mm-hmm.
I've named you.
Yeah, I named, actually mine is Bongo.
Oh.
Bongo, yeah. So Bongo, like, hi, Bongo. What's going on? You know, why are you trying to protect me right now? Mm. Because what it is that there's got two of them, these little two kind of like almond-shaped structures in your brain called the amygdala, one on either side. Mm-hmm. And it's your safety monitor, just always making sure that you're staying comfortable. But the minute you go out of its, into the uncomfortable, it thinks you're in danger. Mm. And so it sends these signals, right, to you, the stress response signal that tells you that you're in danger. And don't go into the uncomfortable. Don't try and do something that you might fail at. Mm-hmm. And that's where the magic happens when we take that step. Mm. We go to the uncomfortable. We go and fail. We do those things. Failure is a good thing. Mm-hmm. It's where success is born.
So instead of masking the anxiety, name it, and befriend it. And then take those risks and feel uncomfortable. Yes. And do hard things.
And you really learn where you're at. I mean, I learned when I went in fourth grade and tried out for softball. I never played in my life, but I went on my own and went down there, grabbed my brother's baseball mitt and played. And I was terrified, but I actually was pretty good at it. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget that. And what came from me from doing that on my own and feeling very powerful about that. So those steps you take that are uncomfortable, those things that you face, you take in your feelings instead of trying to escape them or numb yourself and actually deal with it. That's where the healing starts. Mm-hmm.
Or prevention.
Yes.
Where you never even step into it in the first place.
That's exactly right. Because you can't get addicted to something that you've never tried, really.
That's right.
I mean, I should say, yeah.
If you never take it, you have a 0 chance of becoming addicted.
That's exactly right.
One of my children had to have their wisdom teeth removed. And we went to the dentist or to the oral surgeon. And he says, are you nervous? And she says, yes. And he says, I can give you something for that. And I was there, and I said, is it going to hurt? And he said, no. And I said, well, she's okay to be nervous. She can be nervous.
That's so good.
We don't have to take something to mask our nervousness. But I had an epiphany in that moment of all the kids who go and sit in a dentist chair, who are nervous, whose mom may not be involved in a Play Smart initiative and understand that there's risk in that, because that one Xanax or whatever it may be, they may like the way that feels. And they go out for another one, but this time they get it from a source that's not from the pharmacy, and it's laced and poisoned with fentanyl.
Right.
And so they never even get a chance to become an addict, which we don't want them to become an addict, but they don't even get a chance because it's one pill.
Right.
And I think that's the scary part of what we're dealing with, is we used to look at addiction and abuse and watch the trajectory of the life and the things that happen to get there and all of the other things that come with it. But now we may not even know.
Right. And it's not even just fentanyl now. I mean, because there's xylazine, that's not an opioid, but we also have the nitazines too that are out there that are more potent than fentanyl even. Right. And it's a scary, scary world. And I think all we can do is try to educate our youth and people in general who are using, not because they're weak, but because their brain has been hijacked by this substance, that it just takes one pill, and you don't know. And it's a really scary time. But I think the more we do things like this to try and get the message out to kids and to parents particularly, that's one thing that I think we really need to educate parents, because the number that I talk to, they have no idea about fentanyl.
They don't know.
They have no idea about the increase in overdose deaths from fentanyl, and about the press pills that look exactly the same as, the contaminated pills look exactly the same as the real thing.
We always give the mortality data for South Carolina and the local county that we're in. And what we share is that overdose deaths, the number one or the highest number of overdose deaths is from prescription drugs, number one. Number two of those prescription drugs is opioids. And then we share that the illicit drugs, cocaine and heroin, are the lowest on the now I'm choking. The least amount of people die from those drugs. But we also know that 4 out of 5 heroin users started with a prescription pain pill. And when I share that information with people, you can see them wake up. Because what they used to think is that a heroin user was just a druggie, never had a life choice, never had ambition. They don't realize that they may have gotten a prescription once, misused it, wasn't educated on it, doctor gave it to them, they thought it was safe, started using it, liked it, wanted more, couldn't get it because it's a controlled substance, so they go to the street.
Yeah.
And they either get it in a counterfeit pill form that likely is going to have fentanyl in it, because we know, and this number is low, we believe that 50% of all counterfeit pills have fentanyl. 7 out of 10 of those contain enough to kill you. Or they're going to go and start using the next best thing, which is heroin.
Yeah.
And when we tell people this, it's like all of a sudden every bit of judgment that they ever had in their body goes away, because they can see that it's more than somebody who's made just a bad choice. It's a path.
And if they were able to see the number of people who are suffering, and they're all amongst us, and suffering in silence because of the shame and the stigma that they feel, that people are going to think exactly that you're,
right.
Yeah.
They feel like, and when we talk to high school kids and we talk to them about, usually when people are talking to them about substances, they think that if they were to share that they had a problem, or that they have a friend with a problem, that there's always going to be some type of punitive action behind it. And that's not true.
Right. Right.
And if we could break the stigma, break the shame, and really let people know that we're here to help, we could change the entire landscape.
That's exactly right. And I think too the parents that I speak sometimes to parents, and I have them, they come to the school, supposed to come to the school at night. And what is really, I'm bringing this up because I couldn't figure it out at first, because not many parents would show up. And I would always say, oh, it's because dinner time, they've got, they need someone to babysit, whatever that might be. And that could totally be exactly what it is. But it was when a parent came up to me and said, could you share this on Zoom, or could you do something that is anonymous? Because she said, I know people who want to be here, but they don't want to show up and have other parents judge them, to think that their child
has a problem.
And this has to stop. How many people will it take that lose their lives to fentanyl before we have those parents come in droves to become educated? And I'm not bad mouthing or saying anything to parents, because I get it. I mean, I was busy, but the fact that if they don't feel they can show up because they're going to get judged, that's a problem with our society.
And we have to change the narrative.
Yes.
And the narrative for so long has been that people are making bad choices. Just say no. When in reality, this has all come to play because people didn't know what they didn't know.
Right.
It wasn't a bad choice. Sometimes people make bad choices. I'm not discounting that at all. And I understand there's consequences to all choices. But many of the cases where dependency develops and addiction ensues is from not knowing and misuse. One of the things that scares me, maybe even more than the opioid epidemic, is hearing and knowing that kids in college and in high school are taking Adderall, misusing Adderall, taking it from other people because the pressures we as a society have put on them to not only do well in academics, but hey, you also need to do well in your sport, and hey, you also need to have a social life and attend all of your events and work and all of those things. And so now it's not, I've got to keep up, and the only way that I can keep up is to take an Adderall or whatever that looks like for them. And the likelihood that they get a counterfeit pill is so high, and the likelihood that it is poisoned with fentanyl. And so as a parent, as a teacher, coach, educator, friend, whatever your relationship is to the person, you had no idea there was even a chance that they were misusing. They were just doing all the right things. They were being the role model child, and the whole time.
Yeah, it's just that go.
Yes.
And we honestly just need to slow our roll, right?
And we feed it.
Yeah, we do.
We feed the go. I'm guilty.
Me too. Me too.
But I do want everybody that I come in contact with to know that it's no judgment zone here. Safe space, and I would rather get you the help today than to not be able to help you tomorrow.
That's exactly right. And as many times as you can approach them to try and help them. And with my son, he didn't want help for maybe 4 or 5 times I tried. And he finally came to a place where he actually, he was a musician. He wrote me a song called Getting Clean. Oh. And he played it for me. And honestly, that was like 2 months before he died. So it was there. It was starting. And I would like to say that he knew, like, he could come to me and do that. But it's so hard. And that's what I want to say to people who breaking the cycle of addiction, of that hijacking your brain, is really difficult. But it's very doable. It's difficult, though.
It's difficult. We can do hard things. We can give people the tools to understand that and never even get started.
That's right. And that's
where you and
yes,
I are.
Yes, we're in the prevention
Mm-hmm,
side.
mm-hmm.
And that's what I want to do, because I know that the people, so many friends who are in recovery now,
Mm-hmm.
and God bless them, they are
Mm-hmm.
amazing. I always tell them, you're my hero.
Mm-hmm.
You're my hero, because I know what's going on in their
Mm-hmm.
brain, and they have been able to overcome that. And that's a strength that they are heroes to me.
Yeah. You said something in a conversation that I heard you talking about earlier, and you said the people that you know that are in addiction, that they are some of the best people that you know. And I say that's my same experience. I know several people who struggle they have for their entire lives. And my message is they are the best people. They have the biggest hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And, but they have a disease.
Yes, they have
They
a
are
disease.
at dis-ease within their brains. And it doesn't take away the consequences. It doesn't take away the burden to family, the burden to community, and all of those things. I'm fully aware of that. But they are people.
They're people. And I believe my son was a very empathetic person. He felt a lot for particularly people who were not doing as well as he was.
Mm-hmm.
And his heart was huge. And a lot of those people, I feel that they feel so much for others. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that's a lot to carry.
Take it in. Mm-hmm.
It's a lot to carry. When they feel other people's pain so much,
mm-hmm.
I've always wondered if that's one of the reasons why they may start using, is just how they can sense all of that.
Right.
I was with my son. I have to tell this beautiful story. I was with him at a coffee shop, and it was raining outside, and there was a man who was in a wheelchair, and he was trying to get over the crosswalk, and the light had turned red. And we were in line, and all of a sudden he's like, "I'll be right back, Mom." And he took off, and he went and he pushed him across the street and came back in, and he was soaking wet. And that, that's, was that someone you would call an addict, or, those horrible names that we tell people that's what they are? He was a person who had a disease, and he paid the ultimate price for it.
And you're so brave.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
To take that pain, because I know that it had to be the most painful thing, and probably still is in your entire life. And to bear that to the rest of the world so that other people don't have to have that same pain. That's a brave, courageous thing to do. And I thank you and for being here today. I thank you for all the travel that you do, and I know that it doesn't come with the reward that we're talking about. It's hard work, but you keep doing it, and you're in the trenches.
Yeah.
And I believe great will be your reward because you're the hands and feet. So I appreciate you. I think just in closing, if there's anything that, what's your message? What do you want other people to know? What do you want parents to know, youth to know, me to know? What is it? What is the nugget that we can take away?
When I lost my son, I had a gratitude practice before I lost him. And after I lost him, I stopped. But then 2 weeks after I lost him, I forced myself to get out my gratitude journal. That changed my life. I couldn't find at that time, just looking at it, and I was like, my cup of coffee. I was able to flip on a light switch and it turned on. I got up out of bed. I can't tell people how important it is to do a gratitude practice, whether you are a teen, whether you're an adult, a coach, whatever you are, everybody can do it, because we need to be grateful for every day we're given because it can be short. And we're always thinking about, we have so long, and you don't know. You don't know what you're given. And so every day, at least find 3 things and write it down what you're grateful for, because we have so many gifts around us. And it will change your life.